and much is true. So reach out your hand. There's someone there for you. Try to be brave, pretend there's nothing wrong.
So there you go. It is July 21st, 2017. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast on great stations like the Gwe, CKWE in Tandanega, and Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio. You can follow our audio stream live if you go to www.ltnradionet.com. We always have a show that is running. Our old shows run in a loop on that platform, but when we go live, we break in, and that's where our live feed is coming from. We do have open phone lines for people to join us during the show. We're going to talk about a lot of things, so there's kind of something for everybody, I guess. But if you want to join us by telephone, you can call 855-967-0463. That's the number to call to reach us. You'll actually call into the Gwe in Tandanega, and they'll patch you through to us. Of course, we are Facebook streaming. We are live streaming on Facebook, rather. And that is a great place to catch not only a good look at what we're doing in studio while we're doing the program, but the audio is usually pretty great as well. So it's a good way to listen to the show, even if you don't really want to watch us. So you can do that as well. And of course, we repost. Not only does the Facebook live stream repost automatically, but then we repost a kind of a more produced version of the video of the show on our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV, and so that's where you can catch the show in various forms and at various times. I'm John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. I've got Matt Hill on the board.
Tego.
And I've got I have the pleasure of having Ed Schindler in studio again to join us in the conversation.
Good morning.
And of course, I've got Jake Proud working off camera, off mic, preparing the video stream for Facebook and preparing the video for our Let's Talk Native TV on our YouTube channel. Hey, that opening song is Murray Porter's song. That's not really a released song. It's a brand new song. It'll be on his upcoming album. It's called Don't Let Go, and it's his song to address suicide, which is one of the many subjects that I do plan to talk about today. So I wanted to open the show with that song, and that's just a great tribute. And again, Murray's message: don't let go. Don't do it. If you're thinking about it, don't do it. And I'll tell you, I've got strong feelings about suicide. And again, this the latest big name that hits the news on suicide is this Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park. And I want to address how people respond to these rock stars, these movie stars, these famous comedians, these people in the public eye when they commit suicide, and I want to address how I think it has a detrimental effect, to people who don't have it all to throw away, who haven't had the successes that these people have. We can debate whether, somebody's mental despair justifies suicide or not, and I feel strongly that suicide is just a terrible thing to do. It's a terrible thing to do to yourself, but it's also a terrible thing to do to the loved ones and people who respect you. And there are people in places of influence that can affect people that they've never known, will never know, will have never seen, and I'm talking about young people as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to kind of go through a couple of things. Obviously, last week's show, it was a pretty successful show. If you want to call, I guess grade a show by the number of views, I think we came close to 3,000 views of the show on our Facebook Live feed. I think we're still getting some play on our SoundCloud audio and our YouTube video. And of course, we talked about cannabis, and we talked about the cannabis dispensaries in Tyendinaga in particular, and that it is kind of a controversial issue because there are some are for, some are against. There are legal issues, and that whole struggle between band councils, tribal councils who have, may or may not have relationships with, in this case, with Canada, and their tribal police, which oftentimes are there to enforce Canadian law, not necessarily laws of the community or of the people. So there's all of that. And I posted something on my Facebook group page, and that's Let's Talk Native with John Kane group page, by the way. I said, look, we had a lot of people that watched the show, checked it out at various levels. But we're not going to talk about cannabis every week just to get ratings. And I say that because I don't want anybody to try to mischaracterize what this show is about. The reason we took on that conversation is because it's a relevant conversation. It's a relevant conversation to the prospect of economic development, to the challenges of jurisdiction, to once again revisiting that tension that sometimes exists between people who believe that sovereignty is something that should be preserved and not asserted, and also that tension that exists between people who will assert sovereignty for gain, and whether that gain is personal gain or whether that gain is, in some way looked at as a gain for everybody. That whole debate. This show tackles the conversations that aren't being had enough, primarily, but we also want to talk about the issues that need to be aired out, and so people have a conversation. There's a lot of times I take a stance on issues that are not necessarily the most popular ones, and I'm indifferent still about the cannabis issue.
I don't think there's a night that we could come in here and not have something to talk about. I mean, there's so much that's going on,
right,
and so much to be attended to have those kind of conversations that you're talking about. And we never have a shortage of topics to talk about.
No, and we really don't, because what we find out and what we learn every single day is that there are issues that have been left unaddressed for so long. And we talked about it with regards to things like the Guyana Ragoa recitals, and the lack of use of traditional approaches to conflict resolution, all of those things. I mean, and then of course we can talk about identity issues, which we talk about quite frequently, and because they lace through so much of the problems that we're plagued with. So. Yeah, I mean, so I guess my point is I don't want people thinking that I'm trying to exploit the cannabis issue so more people will listen to the program, and so I said that not to push away from addressing that issue. We will revisit it, and obviously that's an issue that's heating up in Tyendinaga. I've been following it, and I continue to follow it, and frankly, if you don't have the means to do it, and if this is the only place that you can follow it, then I feel like I have an obligation to make people aware of it. So we'll stay on it, but I'm not just going to talk about these one specific issue all the time. Oftentimes, I know tobacco has been an issue that probably has taken up a great deal of our airtime over the years, and part of it is because tobacco has been that battlefield for sovereignty for so long. I mean, I look back, we still got the picture hanging up on the wall from '92, the conflicts on the Thruway, which would happen again in '97, and in fact, wasn't it last week was just the anniversary of the conflict in '92?
25 years.
Yeah. So I mean, so we've got to talk about these issues. But I wanted to revisit last week's show. I stand by that show. I think I asked Tim some tough questions. I mean, in fact, at one point, Matt thought, "Man, you're writing them pretty hard." No, maybe I am, but I want anybody who's in a position to defend what they're doing. I want them to be able to defend it, and I want to give them the voice, the platform to do that, and that's why I asked the tough questions that I did. I have mixed feelings because I'm concerned about substance abuse, but at the same time, when you weigh out if you put it on a scale of smoking marijuana versus shooting up heroin, I think if I had to choose between the two, I don't think there's much of a choice there, and so I do have some questions. I am very much in support of hemp, the cottage industries that can go with hemp, and we talked about that a little bit.
Yep.
And a thorough and clinical review of the medical applications of cannabis, and whether it's just the CBDs or whether it's the for pain relief. I mean, whatever it is, I think it's foolish not to pursue the medical applications of anything, especially something that really is that plentiful in terms of growth and extraction of the chemicals from it. I just think it's foolish not to do that. So, but I'll still say I'm still a little indifferent about the recreational side, but. I'm not saying I'm coming around, but I still have an open mind about it. So let's say that. Okay, want to hit a little bit on the fabulous Andrew Cuomo, governor of the state of New York. I made it out to Albany I actually didn't go to Albany. I was on the radio in Albany on the Capitol Press Room on Wednesday, and I had 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, and Ed, you just heard me do the broadcast. I mean, I rolled through everything. Our entire. I mean, and I say our. I mean the native position on that entire thing. I know I kept getting pressed from Susan Arbetter, and she's a veteran journalist. She's great at what she does. She kept wanting to find out whether Todd Gates would still meet with the governor. In fact, she wanted to know whether he could meet with the governor if the council approved it. Because one of the things that I said in my interview was that some of the guys on council had been clear that they oppose meeting with the governor. And in fact, some of them had said we won't meet with the governor. Or we don't think we should meet with the governor unless he apologizes. You made a very good point before the show that getting outraged or insulted or angry over the governor's comments probably gives his comments more value than they actually deserve. I don't know that an apology is any more meaningful than his insults in the first place. I think the idea of asking the governor for an apology is a way to make him squirm a little bit, and so I don't have a problem with that either. But I still think that it's wrong to suggest that a meeting is necessary with him.
I think it's the other way around, that if basically you just shut off any contact with him personally, not the governor's office, but him, that would make him squirm.
I agree, and I think the media has played it up quite a bit, and they've said that in fact they've characterized some of Todd Gates' comments in the past, or mischaracterized it. They've said, well, Todd Gates has been asking for a meeting with the governor. Well, he hasn't. I mean, not to my knowledge. Anything I've ever seen was Todd Gates saying that he was willing to meet with him. He had heard, and I don't know if it was directly or indirectly, that the governor wanted to meet, and he says, well, we're willing to meet. But then the media said, over and over again, and I'm talking about Channel 2, Time Warner Cable News, I mean, Channel 5 or 7, I mean, they've all went through and said the same thing. The Seneca Nation has expressed a willingness to negotiate a settlement of this dispute with the governor, and I don't know why they keep saying that, but where are you coming up? You're just making that stuff up. I mean, and I don't want to sound like Trump with fake news, but just state what is really being said. I mean, there's been no comment from the Seneca Nation that said we want to renegotiate a revenue sharing agreement with the state. In fact, the Seneca Nation could not have been more clear. It's done. It's over with. All we've suggested is that we want to meet with the local municipalities to resolve any expenditures that they have because of our presence that may have been covered by the previous revenue sharing. Come to the table. We'll itemize some billing. You guys can tell us how we're costing you, what we're costing you, and we'll make you whole. And then we can look at other programs possibly too.
They never mention that part.
They never bring that up.
Nobody ever mentions, even Deister and them. They never mention that, they get billing and they pay for their.
Everyone, and I keep hearing politicians saying, well, it costs us, and we're out these expenses, but they never come back and say, although the Seneca said all we have to do is come to them and list those expenses and we'll be made whole. They couldn't have been. The Seneca Nation could not have been more clear on that. But still, you've got Deister and Smitty was trying to have a meeting with the governor this past week. Although I think that fell through from Salamanca. Look, what Susan Arbetter kept asking me is, will Todd Gates meet with the governor even if the council doesn't want him to? And that's kind of what she was implying. And I said, yes, it's entirely possible. And from the buzz that I'm hearing that Todd is almost too eager to go ahead and meet with the governor. And look, he's the president of Seneca Nation. He can do whatever that 2-page Constitution of Seneca Nation says he can do, but he can't make a deal that both the council and then the people of Seneca Nation have to approve any kind of deal. So I don't know if Todd wants to meet with him to rub it in the governor's face and say, look, I said no. I don't know if that's what it's all about.
That would be a good thing if he could, what do you call it, extrapolate?
Yeah, I'd love for him to, but what value is that? I think sometimes, trying to have a face-to-face meeting just so you can say, not just no, but hell no, we're not going to pay you. I don't know if that has any value. I think here's what could come from a meeting with the governor. I think to have a thoughtful conversation with him, say, look, we're not going to continue with the revenue sharing with the state, but if you're really concerned about Western New York, if you're really concerned about the Niagara Falls region, the Buffalo region, the Salamanca region, if you're really concerned about, then step back and encourage the leadership from those municipalities to meet with the Senecas and work out what they can.
That's all we've asked all along.
And right now he is serving as an impediment to those folks, because every time he puffs his chest out and says, "Wow, the Senecas are operating in bad faith right now." And we're going to make them pay. His last statement said they're going to pay and they're going to continue to pay. That sounded like strong arming. That sounded like mob talk, for crying out loud. So there's that. I'm always pleased to join Susan Arbetter on her show. It broadcasts right out of the Capitol. So it's not like the governor's not going to hear the message. If Todd Gates is going to go ahead and meet with the governor, I hope he has a very limited conversation. Because the other thing I keep hearing is this idea that this understanding that the state has warrants triggering arbitration. And I don't think it does. I know they've got a whole bunch of white lawyers advising them otherwise, and high paid consultants telling them otherwise. But I got to tell you, the language is so clear. And then one of the things that I've made very clear on Susan Arbetter's show, the governor has failed to cite one example, one line, one portion of a line from the compact or the MOU that there's been some suggestion has some hidden message in it. He hasn't brought forth one line from any agreement that says, oh yeah, here's where they say they got to keep paying past 14 years. And there's a reason for that, because it doesn't exist. It just simply doesn't exist. So, that's what's kind of unfortunate, is that the governor keeps saying these things without substantiating anything. So what he's doing is he's giving Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Salamanca false hope that he's going to reinstate.
That's just like the New York State Lottery, right?
Yeah,
that's
dollar dream.
They sell false hope every day.
Yeah,
that's what their business is.
So I wanted to revisit that. We'll see what's going to come of this thing.
Is there a current after 2013 version of the compact? Was there anything changed?
No, and in fact, that's what one of Susan's questions was. Did the MOU amend the compact? And I said, no, it didn't. It didn't amend it. All it did was put the payments back on schedule. It did clarify some issues relating to the state's breach, like they could no longer call them casinos. They had to call them racinos. And it did lay out what was supposed to be a more specific itemization of the fees that they submit, which frankly they haven't been compliant with.
Yeah.
But it didn't. In fact, the whole idea was to not amend the compact. And I think that's why the Seneca Nation said, we're going to settle this thing just with how much we retain from escrow accounts, but we're not going to change the percentage going forward because that would require amending the compact.
What was done by the woman who was interviewing you was that she said that the governor wanted to extend the payments, and therefore that he negotiated for it to amend with renew.
Yeah, but I think what she missed.
But what wasn't mentioned was that it wasn't just something that the council could agree upon. It had to be presented to the people at a referendum. They can't just make a change from the council or from the president. They have to present it to the people. Nothing was presented to the people to change anything, therefore nothing got changed.
Yeah, and I don't know. You're probably right. I think any change to the compact may very well require a referendum by the people.
It does require a referendum, and I'm one of the people, so I know it didn't get contact.
So I know that the MOU did not change the referendum, and in fact, leading up to the automatic renewal, which took place in December when this revenue sharing expired, leading up to the automatic renewal, there were certain deadlines that if there was a request to amend or clarify anything in the compact, the state had to do it by such and such a date, and the Seneca Nation had to do it by such and such a date. Seneca Nation was fine with it just renewing because it renewed without any payments because the payments ended at 14 years. So, I think the governor's in a weak spot. But here's the other thing I'll say, and I've mentioned it before on the show. I think that if the Seneca Nation does agree to go into arbitration, then they should raise the issue about whether the revenue sharing was legal or not, whether it met the test that the Interior Department laid out for a substantial and quantifiable cession by the state for the dollars that they got. Because I think if you measure $1.5 billion that the state received, and a quarter of which came back to these municipalities, if you measure that against the value and try to come up with some quantifiable value for the exclusivity, I think the Seneca's overpaid. And maybe that's a point that when put right out front, we'll go into arbitration. And you can make whatever case you want for whether this thing continues after 14 years. You're pissing up a rope. You're trying to, I mean, you're wasting your time there. But here's what we want to debate. We want to debate how much of that $1.5 billion you need to return because of the lack of value for what you provided us.
There's not only lack of value and a quantifiable value of what they negotiated, but there's also a question of when the state breached it, because they claim to be offering exclusivity, but they were giving gambling opportunities to the racetracks right within the same county as a.
Well, see, my argument with that is even if they can make the argument that wasn't a clear, breach of the revenue sharing or the exclusivity provision of the revenue sharing provision, then at very least it diminished the value of that of that exclusivity. And I think the test isn't whether they inserted language that allowed them to breach it. Okay, you may have done that. But the test should be, did you diminish the value of the exclusivity to the point that the revenue sharing was being conducted as a tax, not as a pay to play sort of thing, so to speak. And I think the state could be on some pretty skinny ground there. And I think if this issue does have to go in front of people, I think the Seneca should be arguing about the overpayment and the lack of a quantifiable value for what they paid for.
I just posted the compact on the Let's Talk Native page.
Oh, there you go.
You can read it through 793 pages.
Well, and that's the other thing that kind of hacks me off about the media, because the media they're making these assumptions that the Seneca Nation wants to meet with the state to renegotiate a revenue sharing, which they don't. That the Seneca Nation they're interpreting the compact to say this. No, you're the media. Read the damn thing. Right now, Tom Precious is the only guy, and he's never been a real big, he's not exactly been a fan of the Seneca Nation, but he flat out said, look, I looked at the compact and it's not there. So when all of these guys, again, whether it's TV, radio, or print, if you're suggesting that somehow the Senecas are interpreting something, then why don't you say what they're interpreting? They're interpreting the exact language of the compact. That's what they're interpreting, and stop suggesting that that Cuomo has a case. Because hold him to it. One of the things that after the Cuomo made his ridiculous comments about Senecas having a history of breaking agreements, nobody even asked him what that meant. And again, I brought it up on Susan Arbetter's show. If you're referring to what you resolved, the settlements that you guys reached in 2013, the Senecas followed the exact language and the dispute resolution clauses of the compact. They didn't not follow the agreement. It's not like they spent $600 million. They escrowed it just the way the provisions said to, and they entered into arbitration just the way the provisions and as it turns out, the state was the only one who breached it. So when Governor Cuomo stands up and says the Senecas have a history of litigating, which they don't really have a history of litigating, or that they have a history of entering into agreements and then breaking them, that's it's not just insulting, it's an exact reversal of who's breaking agreements and who's not breaking agreements. So, I had to revisit that, and again, I was grateful to Susan Arbetter having me right there in the Capitol, my voice being echoing through the Capitol chambers, and hopefully Cuomo heard some of those words.
The right windows were open. We heard you.
I think so. Of course, Cuomo managed to make it back to Western New York for another visit. This time because of the tornadoes that ripped up ironically, the tornadoes rip up one of the sites of the that are part of the breach of the Seneca gaming compact.
There was a few comments about that. The forces that be were getting New York back.
Oh, there was karma and that whole thing. Yeah, the laws of nature.
Our competition.
But those people who went there to gamble at the Hamburg Fairgrounds and had trees thrown through their windows.
Yeah, they went to the Seneca
Wasn't
casino.
Us. We weren't there. I was in New York. I wasn't even there. So
the Thunders.
The Thunders, yeah. All right. Hey, we're just at the bottom of the hour. We'll take a break when we come back. I want to get into some pretty serious stuff, and then some stuff that's not so serious. But we'll tackle it when we come back. Let's see. What are we going to go out with? Razorwire again?
Yeah, John McLeod, Razorwire, his new release.
All right. Love the song. Go ahead and give it a listen.
Yourself to blame. And every morning when the sun comes up, you stand in your cage like a little pup. You wait for the man to turn the key. You step outside to greet a razor wire. It's a crying shame. Night when all the killers are down, I hear the teardrops splashing on that concrete ground. It's a dangerous game. They cry for their own pain. A razor wire pain. Watch it gleam on that sunny day, tempting you to try beyond your way. You try to swagger like you don't care, but you're always under that wire's glare. A razor wire, it's a scary game. A razor wire's game. raise a wife. It's a lonely game. A razor wire pain. Giving me no pain. Razor wire pain. Working on my brain. Razor wire pain.
All right, thanks for coming back. Hey, my sponsors are Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, good friends like Ed Schindler right here in studio, Tracy Brown, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and many others who have helped the program continue to educate, entertain, and inform for the last 7 years. I thank all of you for joining in the fight and doing your part, and whether it's those of you who have helped in the past or those who continue to help, I sure appreciate it. I want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming, and I also want to thank CKWE for both the simulcast and the rebroadcasts, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, Indigenous Resistance Radio, and all of you who share the Facebook live streams, share the SoundCloud posts, share the links to our YouTube channel and our YouTube broadcasts. I thank all of you for doing that, and I encourage you to do it because I think that's the way the conversations continue. Now I'm going to get into. First let me keep it a little light just for a second here, but it's going to get real serious real quick. But before I rain on anybody's mood too much, I got to congratulate all of first off, all the Native kids producing competing, I should say, in the Native American Indigenous Games, North American Indigenous Games. And I know that the teams coming from this area are doing quite well. I've seen, some of the girls, that we see running around the shop here that are, I think they won gold yesterday in the under 16, I think it was, or under 9, I don't know, but anyway, one of the age groups. So we've seen our lacrosse teams do well, our basketball teams do well. You mentioned archery. We had somebody shoot for gold.
I think Shayrod got a goal for wrestling.
Yeah. I mean, just so our, the folks from here have represented us very, very well. I know, Matt, you and I joked and gave a little bit of grief because the team from here is called Haudenosaunee, but the problem with the setup with the Indigenous Games is that they tried to break it up by state and province. And so to watch Team Haudenosaunee go there and then wave the New York State flag, knowing the problems that we have in New York State, regardless of them, the idea of competing under the state flag, I think, is very, very problematic. And I think many of the people there feel the same way. It was raised. I think me and a few others pointed out that Kahnawake does not compete.
They're Eastern Door.
They just compete as the Eastern Door. They don't compete as for Quebec. In fact, I don't know if Quebec sent other teams. They probably did. It's a big province. Who knows? But
it's Eastern Door and North something. I'm not sure what the rest of it is.
Yeah,
I just seen it on.
Yeah, but anyway. So I mean, it's and I think the next time the team from the Haudenosaunee team goes there, they should strip away the New York, because I think. One of the comments that I made, I understand that sometimes we use New York as a geographic description. We say it's where of the native territory is in New York, and when we say that, I got to assume that most people say it, they're talking about meaning within the geographical lines that that make up New York, not meaning in New York as far as being within or being a part of New York necessarily. And I think to say Haudenosaunee and put the NY afterwards to indicate geography is one thing. But once you pull out that flag and you start waving it, now you're saying something completely different. But all that aside, I'm really, really proud of what our young people have done. Going out there and competing, and I'm seeing a lot of success, and we'll do a complete rundown next week when we get all the totals and we get not just a medal count, but what teams won what, and or medaled in what categories. We'll go through it all. But I'm really proud of what these young people have done, and it's nice to see sports being one of those areas that young people can use, not, I guess, as a way to express themselves and a way to, compete and be, give purpose, because we have a lot of people that are struggling. And, I just saw the reports last week that suggested there were two, kids, one was 12 and one was maybe even under 12. I don't remember now. It's such tragedy that it's hard to concentrate on it. But the idea that a 12-year-old commits suicide on a native territory in Ontario, and it was two, and we've heard time and time again where one territory and another is declared a state of emergency in their territory due to suicides, youth suicides, kids committing suicide. I posted something on Facebook and I got a rise out of some folks because what I posted was my anger at famous folks, and coming to mind this Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park committing suicide, and then the outpouring of sympathy and adulation and praise and justification for it, and again romanticizing and heroizing the whole idea of suicide. Every one of those persons who weighs in and says something like, "Oh, his pain is over now. He's in a happier place." Do you realize the message you're sending to young people? So look, I don't care if it's Robin Williams, I don't care if it's Kurt Cobain or C. Philip Hoffman or whatever the guy's name is, who the actor who killed himself. I don't care if it's Prince. I don't care if it's Michael Jackson. I don't care if it's Chris Cornell or Chester Bennington. You guys doing this stuff. Hey, you want to go disappear, go out in the desert someplace and disappear and kill yourself so it becomes a mystery, then that's one thing. But when you do this kind of vulgar display, you hurt people. You hurt people that know you, that you know, and you hurt people that you have no idea who they are. So the 12-year-old who says, why not commit suicide? I can go to that happy place, right? I mean, it's part of the whole problem with the way people have tried to bring spirituality into death, and suggest that when we die, we're all going to be together in some happy place. Look, if you believe that, I don't know where that comes from and how you're going to prove that's the case. It's a real romantic idea that all the great rock and roll legends are up there in heaven playing in some awesome concert someplace. But look, when you got a 12-year-old kid whose territory is so impoverished, whose prospects for the future are limited because of Canadian or U.S. policy that has inflicted this poverty on their territories, that's inflicted the lack of hope. So you got these young kids whose parents are battling substance abuse, domestic violence, where girls can turn up missing, and the local and the national and local authorities don't even care. Missing and murdered Indigenous women, for instance, when people do stand up for a cause, they are dehumanized, like what the police did to those folks at the Dakota Access Pipeline. I mean, when you create this, go ahead.
When you got a nation leader, Teresa Spence, threatening to do a hunger strike until to complete a hunger strike, what message does that give?
Yeah, I mean, I got some grief because I wasn't supportive of Attawapiscat's high-paid elected chief, Teresa Spence, when she threatened to kill herself by a hunger strike. I mean, what is the message you're sending? So no, I'm not going to join in on the chorus of mourners for Chester Bennington. or Chris Cornell. And you know what? There's a part of me that I regret being a fan. I regret helping them reach whatever success they've reached, to the extent that I may or may not have been. But I regret that, because if this is what you did when you've reached your fame and fortune, that you do this and you send that kind of message, and not just to our young people, but to people all over. I'm troubled by it. And look, I understand. I understand the whole idea of depression and mental illness, and and of course the medications that oftentimes have a side effect with suicidal thoughts. And look, I get all that. I get all that. But the idea of killing yourself and doing it in such a vulgar and graphic manner that people are drawn to it. I mean, how many people couldn't wait to hear the details of how this one died or how that one died? Robin Williams, everyone wanted to get into the details of how he killed himself. It's look, if you have reached a place in your life and you have nobody that you can talk to, then you're probably not trying hard enough. And I say to the people who have loved ones that are struggling, man, be there for them. So Murray Porter's song, Don't Let Go, I mean, what he's saying is hold on. Hold on, help's coming somewhere. But it can only come if people know that you're struggling too.
Endeavor to persevere.
And there we go. Endeavor to persevere. I mean, we've got to, folks. I mean, look, how people feel about somebody who's reached a pinnacle of their career committing suicide, and they call that a tragedy? No, because that person lived. That person got to realize their dreams, and maybe their dreams weren't what they expected. Maybe they found some shallowness or hollowness in their success. But you know what? When those suicides encourage a 12-year-old to do it, they used to not measure that. Statistically, youth suicide didn't exist. I mean, it was such a small number that when they would calculate youth, it wouldn't show up. So it was statistically zero up until just a few years ago. And now where does it show up strongly? Not just with people of color, but specifically Native people. We top the charts. I mean, and it's not even close. So I will not heroize and romanticize suicide. I don't care who does it.
I think it's really important for people to understand that as they learn about our people's history and culture, they start wondering, why can't it be like that? And people have to understand that the young people have to understand that it is like that. We just have to become part of it. Because the fact of the matter is that the culture that was existent prior to European contact was not just amongst the people, it was amongst the entire creation. And therefore, the people have to understand that even if you don't have a relative at this moment, go and listen to the streams, go and listen to the birds, go and be part of that. Because
observe nature.
Grounding.
Yeah. I mean, human beings are the only species on the planet that commit suicide. There is none. I'm not saying that animals don't have accidents. I mean, you hear what's the story of the lemmings who followed? Mm-hmm. They're not really trying to kill themselves. They're just being, misled. But human beings are the only species that does this kind of thing. I mean, I'm not saying animals don't show sorrow and maybe even depression. I mean, I've seen animals who've maybe somebody died in the family and you see that they're lonely and that kind of stuff. But you never see one. I mean, maybe every dead dog you see on the side of the road is a suicide. I don't think so. But look, I had to mention that.
What about whales and stuff like that?
When they beach themselves?
Yeah.
I don't think they're. I think they're
Dolphins?
already dying. I don't think they're. I don't know. I guess maybe that's something
I
to.
mean, we don't have whale psychologists or nothing.
Yeah, no, or what do they call them?
Oceanographers?
Whale whisperers or whatever else. Yeah, no, we don't. But we do need to have more people pay attention.
Wait a minute. What
to
about
loved ones.
bugs when they fly into the bug zappers?
No, they're being hypnotized. See, that's different too. I mean,
Being drawn.
yeah, they're being drawn in. Stay away from the light.
I can't help it.
It's so beautiful. No, sorry, I'm not
That's
gonna.
a bug's life.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. We're quoting bugs. It's a bug. All right. But anyway, I wanted to mention that, and look, let the criticism rein in. I don't say the things that I say because I think they're popular. I want to be thought provoking.
But it is a valid point, though.
Well, and I think it's a valid point. And if you don't agree with me, then okay, don't agree with me, but let's have a conversation. But even as we're having the conversation, and even if you pity Cobain or Williams or Bennington, even if you are really sympathetic to them and to their families and that kind of stuff, look, that's fine. But don't romanticize what they did. Because there are people watching, there are young people watching who don't have the life experiences that the rest of us do. They haven't lived long enough. And when you romanticize an act like this, it just pushes a little bit closer to their plate, just a little bit closer. So that is my grievance. That is my complaint about this thing. That's my rant on suicide. It makes me angry. It makes me angry when somebody who, especially somebody who should be responsible, lets such a thing happen. Well, not just lets it happen, but then romanticize it. So it seems like a viable option for people who are struggling with the challenges of life. So I want to mention that. A couple other things. Hey, I want to give props to all of those guys. And from what I understand, it's happened multiple times. Protests have erupted surrounding these Columbus ship replicas. The Nina and the Pinta, apparently replicas of those ships were built in the Caribbean. And in somebody's infinite wisdom, they thought, in the interest of history, they were going to sail those ships where historically they never even came close to, which was up to New York Harbor and up the Hudson River and
Erie Canal. That's the historic voyage of Columbus up to Erie Canal.
I mean, the thing that people should be noting is that it's BS. Columbus never made it to Turtle Island. He hit a couple of fringe islands there before he finally turned his men against them, and then actually had to go back in chains. I mean, this is. I think any and all protests against these ships is absolutely warranted. When I first heard this announcement, and I saw the thing, I said, well, maybe we should send some replica flaming arrows into the side of these things. I mean, honestly, if these things were to crash and capsize, I don't want anybody to get killed in the process, but I would, I wouldn't lose an ounce of sleep. Let one of those Hamburg tornadoes rip one of these things apart. I mean, honestly, it is insulting for these ships to think that they're doing this thing to demonstrate some sort of historical point and have them go through our homelands. Man, I tell you, I'm not a big fan of rock throwing, but I think I'd consider it if I was on the Erie Canal myself.
I've seen an article about that, and the couple of the guys that were protesting, they invited them on to the ship to check it out, and they said they declined at first, but then after a while they said, all right, we'll go check it out. So they walk on the ship and they're looking around, and they got these pictures of them making it. They start looking at the pictures, and there's all like South American guys making these things.
Yeah, so all people probably low wage guys, almost like the slaves that got hauled back in those things. Yeah, no, it's sad. A couple other things. Another area that I may have ruffled some feathers has to do with John McCain. John McCain has brain cancer. 81 years old. He's had cancer a few times, melanomas and that kind of stuff, and he's got cancer. And even the left, the politically left, are, oh, poor John McCain, we feel so bad for you. You know what? I could give a rat's ass about John McCain. Honestly, this is a guy who he epitomizes white privilege if not white supremacy, but white privilege anyway. I mean, even all of the war hero thing. You know, when I saw an article that broke down how many medals this guy got for the amount of sorties he was actually on, he was averaging like a medal an hour. Why? Because his dad. Honestly, no, he was averaging like a medal an hour because his dad was an admiral. And when he got shot down because he was actually bombing areas that he wasn't even supposed to be bombing. He was actually committing war crimes. So that's John McCain, your war hero. So he gets shot down, gets jacked up, ejecting from his plane.
Was he hanging in a tree or something?
I don't know, broke his arm or something like that and never healed right. But, apparently prisoner of war camps don't have great medical facilities. Who knew, right? And everyone wants to heroize, again, while he was in a prisoner of war. Well, he was an admiral's son. He was a valuable, prisoner to have. Absolutely. Do you think the United States would release somebody who was the son of a major military figure and of their enemy? Give me a break. So then what happens? Now he leads a charmed life. He gets elected over and over and over again. Gets mired in controversy over the savings and loan scams in the Keating Five. I mean, this isn't a guy who's got a great track record. And the legislation has always been very strong right-wing legislation. He's done things to harm the land, to harm people. He's 81 freaking years old, and he's sick. Hey, look, sorry about your luck. You've dodged a bullet how many times? Literally, I guess, a few times. But dodged a bullet with cancer, that's fine. But you lived to 81 years old, and you know what? You've lived not just not only have you outlived everybody in your state in terms of average life expectancy, but more specifically, you've certainly outlived the life expectancy of Native people who live in Arizona, whose lives you have helped make more miserable. And you've exploited their land for everything from mining to all kinds of. I mean, you didn't. I suspect your cancer didn't get caused because of your living conditions. Like the Native people who have to live under some of the policies that you've been a part of implementing. This is a guy who the entire Republican Party was hoping they could get out of the hospital bed to vote to strip everybody of health care. And yet you still got people. Even Barack Obama waved in, oh, yeah, war hero, cancer, you don't know what you're up against fighting the Maverick. Give me a break, the Maverick. So, no, I'm not sympathetic to John McCain. And you know what? I didn't wish this cancer upon him. I'm not a believer in karma. I mentioned that earlier, but I'm not a believer in karma. I don't think that he got cancer because of the evil deeds that he's done in his life. But you know what? Nature doesn't really discriminate. But I'll tell you what does discriminate is policies, U.S. policies, healthcare policies. You know what's discriminatory? The fact that a poor person is in your state is not going to get nearly the high level of healthcare that John McCain's going to get. He stands a better fighting chance, even at 81 years old, of beating cancer because of who he is. Not because of what he is, not because he's a war hero or some tough maverick, but because he's lived a charmed life in terms of affluence, in terms of, political power. I mean, why is an 81-year-old still in office anyway? Why doesn't the freaking guy retire? I mean, it's like that guy down in Manhattan, Herman Farrell. He was like 90 years old. When do these people retire? I mean, I don't know. This guy is still in the Senate, still. I mean, yeah, has he spoken up about against Trump a little bit? Yeah, but he's still going to pass the same legislation for Trump care if he could. So no, I'm not sympathetic. And all of you guys want to sing the praises of John McCain being a centrist. Not. I mean, that's just plain BS. I get so frustrated because I listen to this crap, and it is just that. It is just such BS. Well, and of course, last and least, Donald Trump. Things are starting to unravel a little bit for the Trumpster, for the Trumpty Dumpty. It's not going real well for him. I understand his press secretary, Sean Spicer. You said that not only did he quit, but he actually said that he quit because he couldn't stand trying to cover for a moron or something.
He couldn't stand working and covering for someone who didn't know how to do his job.
I mean, well, kudos to you, Spicy, for finally,
Spicy.
for finally
His spicy
speaking up.
senses?
Yeah, his spicy senses. Yeah. And apparently he fired one lawyer. I think a PR person from one of the law firms representing him quit. Things are starting to unravel. And plus, we're hearing conversations that he's been having about trying to explore the extent of his executive powers when it comes to pardoning, whether he can pardon family members.
He's doing research with the attorneys as to whether he can pardon his family,
Or
his
himself.
aides, and himself. And
Well-
the question comes across, why is he looking into that if he's not guilty of anything?
Well, not to mention, he went on record saying that he wishes he never put Jeff Sessions in because he's still fuming over the fact that Sessions recused himself on any of the Russia stuff. So so it sounds like Sessions is probably going to quit here soon, too. I mean, it is really starting to unravel. And keep in mind that this has been the most ineffective, the most incompetent president. Now, and I say this not because I think, man, we sure needed to have Hillary Clinton in the White House. Look, not my president either way. I'm not an advocate for Hillary Clinton. I think Bernie Sanders was a better choice, although I still have problems with the way some of these people view war and Israel and so many of these other issues. But I'll tell you, Trump has demonstrated himself to be the most incompetent and most ignorant person to ever get elected. And the crazy part is, the people who voted for him are too stupid to even know. I mean, I saw a whole article in the paper that said that most Trump supporters just are completely incapable of understanding what's wrong. You know, I mean, they're so blindly loyal to this guy. It's incredible.
There's one thing that happened, and that was a question when the Republicans got elected into the presidency, plus the Congress. They were asking people if they approved of the repeal of ACA, the Affordable Care Act. And they said they don't care. They have Obamacare.
Well, and then there were people who said, "Oh, I agree with the Affordable Care Act. I just don't like Obamacare." I mean, these people don't. They're so clueless. I mean,
They asked everybody
really
about
are.
Obama Akbar or whatever that was, and it was the fictional town of Aladdin.
Yeah,
And they're all for that.
Yeah, let's bomb Akbar. Yeah, Aladdin's hometown. Yeah. So I mean, what was that reminds me, another John McCain quote. Go back on John McCain. Remember when he stood up and started singing "Bomb, Bomb, 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 Iran"?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a guy who could make light out of killing people. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to have sympathy for him, but as I watch this presidential administration just completely unravel, and I hope it unravels slowly. Man, I don't really want to see him out of office real quick. I mean, I want this thing to be like a painful thing, and not. For one thing, I think the Democrats are so incapable of really doing anything substantial. It's really going to take the Republicans to continue to ride off a cliff with Trump, and it'll be fun. We'll watch it week to week, and we'll talk more. We never know when some real juicy thing's going to come out of Trump's mouth.
There's been some juicy. Around Christmas, before he was inaugurated, they had people saying that Trump required to have a psychologist. He had to be tested by a psychologist and have a psychologist on his staff because of what he was liable to do. And that was because he was ready to launch the nuclear weapons.
Yeah, right off the bat.
And then Congress started talking about passing a resolution, passing a law, which required the president to get the permission of Congress before he could use any nuclear or weapons of mass destruction.
You know, people think that the guy in North Korea, Kim Jong-un, is an idiot. Well, I'll tell you. You take a wild card like that in North Korea, trying to push nuclear weaponry, and then you've got the moron with the biggest nuclear arsenal in the history of the world.
Right.
It's incredible. All right. Hey, I will. We'll be back here Monday night. Do another show. There's no telling what we'll have by then. Hopefully, we can get some updates on how our kids did out there in Toronto for the North American Indigenous Games. But we never know what news tidbits are going to have between now and then. So I can't even predict. So we'll see you Monday and do it all over again. Yahweh.
Yahweh.